Hello and welcome back. Today I'm wrapping up episode 1 from season 1 of Great British Bake Off with the chocolate cake challenge. I've chosen to make Prague Cake, often considered the Russian counterpart to the famous Zacher cake from Vienna. It's pretty straightforward. Chocolate sponge, chocolate buttercream, jam, and chocolate glaze. So let's get started. First, let's make the sponge. It's a classic sponge cake with a bit of butter and cocoa. Start by preheating the oven to 350F or 180C and get a 20 centimeters or 8-inch cake pan, springform, or a cake ring. For the ingredients, I've already separated 6 eggs and then I measured out 150 grams of sugar, 25 grams of unsweetened cocoa powder, not the Dutch processed one, 115 grams of cake flour, and 40 grams of unsalted butter. It needs to be melted in the microwave beforehand and slightly cooled down. To begin the batter, whip the egg yolks with half of the sugar until the mixture is light and pale. Just a quick note, do not let the sugar sit on the egg yolks for too long or they can burn. Whenever a recipe calls for separately whipped egg whites and egg yolks, I always start with the yolks since they can wait around for longer because the egg white foam will lose its shape really fast. Now that the egg yolks are ready, let's move on to the egg whites. Whip them until there is no clear egg white left and everything looks frothy. Then start adding sugar but slowly. When you reach soft peak stage, stop here because going further makes it tough to blend with other ingredients. Next, I gently folded the egg whites into the yolks. Then I sifted the dry ingredients on top and folded everything together. Just be careful not overly do so. For the butter, I mixed a small portion of the egg mixture into the butter first because I wanted to create an emulsion. It makes it much easier to incorporate this butter into the egg flour mix this way. Once a small portion is properly mixed, I fold it into the rest of the batter. Carefully pour the batter into your prepared cake pan and bake it for about 30 minutes. Keep an eye on your cake because I always say every oven is different. After the cake is baked, release it from the pan and let it cool down on the rack for a few hours. And now let's jump into the next day and make the buttercream. We'll need 200 grams of unsalted butter at room temperature, 1 egg yolk, 20 grams of water, 120 grams of sweetened condensed milk, a tablespoon of vanilla sugar, here I used my homemade one, and 10 grams of cocoa powder, again, just the normal one. First, we'll make the syrup. Mix together the egg yolk and water and then add the condensed milk. We need to boil it until it thickens, but be careful not to scramble it. It is a similar process to making custard, so as soon as the syrup can coat the back of a spoon, take it off the heat. Let it cool down to room temperature. Once the syrup is cool enough, start whipping the butter and slowly incorporate all the syrup. Beat for a couple of minutes until the cream is light and fluffy. Then add the cocoa powder and beat for another few more minutes. And now it's time to assemble the cake. Cut the sponge into 3 layers. Divide the buttercream into 2 parts and use it to sandwich the layers. For the next step, the original recipe calls for apricot jam, but I didn't have any at home, so I've decided to use orange marmalade instead. I think the orange flavor goes really well with chocolate, even though it does make my cake non-authentic. I also didn't remove all the orange bits to get a smooth glaze, but rather used it as is. And that's why you'll notice that after glazing, my cake will be a bit bumpy, which is okay with me. We'll use the warmed up jam to cover the entire cake from the outside and we'll leave it to firm up a bit before glazing in the fridge. The final component of our cake is the chocolate glaze. It's basically equal amounts of chocolate and butter and you just need to melt it together. Then use a stick blender to emulsify everything properly, and by the way, almost anything in baking and pastry that involves chocolate will benefit from proper emulsion, aka usage of an immersion blender. Let the glaze cool down for a bit, and it's also better if your cake stays in the fridge for maybe 30 plus minutes before glazing because this will help the glaze to set faster. To glaze, I usually arrange a workspace where I can collect all the dripping glaze on plastic film because you can totally reuse it later. Just make sure you run it through a sieve to get rid of any cake pieces that might get into it. Glazing can look intimidating, but trust me, just go for it. Even if it's not perfect, like mine here, who cares as long as it tastes great? And here we are, the Prague cake is ready to be tasted. I didn't let the glaze set firmly because I was too eager to try the cake. However, if you wait until tomorrow, or at least for a few hours while the cake is in the fridge, you'll get a nice thick layer of chocolate on top. The result was really good. I'm quite happy with this cake. It is definitely a great option if you want to make something simple, quick, to satisfy your chocolate cravings. The sponge is very soft and airy, but at the same time, it's absolutely not dry thanks to the butter. The buttercream is nice and silky, and the jam adds this additional dimension to keep things interesting. I totally recommend this cake to any chocolate-loving bakers out there. And that's it for today. I hope you enjoyed the video, thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.